Have you ever felt like you're being pulled into an endless spiral of anxiety and stress? In this age of constant connection, it seems we're becoming more and more lost amid all the turbulence and invisible pressure. Every delay, every criticism, every unexpected event has the power to shatter the sense of peace we've tried so hard to build. Modern life feels like it's drowning us, leaving us craving stability, a place of refuge that isn't controlled by what's happening outside. Is there a philosophy forged over thousands of years that can offer us a map to find an inner peace, a state that isn't shaken by the chaos around us? Is there a way for us to learn how to control your mind and your responses, instead of letting impulsive reactions take the wheel? More than 2,000 years ago, a great philosopher named Epictetus distilled the wisdom of Stoic philosophy into a practical tool. The only thing we truly own is our moral character and our own judgments. True resilience does not come from removing obstacles, but from building inner strength strong enough to face them. Today, we're going to begin a deep exploration of Stoicism, a path to cultivating inner power, mastering your emotions, and learning self-discipline and self-control so you can achieve spiritual freedom. This video will share 10 practical principles, the keys to making sure that your external circumstances will no longer be the ones deciding your inner peace. After touching the shared pain of anxiety and tension, we need a solution. That is exactly when the philosophy of Stoicism steps into your life. Today, we're not just going to talk about Stoic philosophy as an academic concept from ancient Greece, but explore it as a practical tool to achieve true spiritual freedom. Why has Stoicism become more important and relevant than ever in this technological age? In a world obsessed with handling criticism, chasing an illusory perfection, and constantly fearing failure, this philosophy offers a solid foundation. It teaches us that the root of all misery does not lie in what happens to us, but in how we interpret those events and how we deal with negative emotions. We will focus on the wisdom of Epictetus, a great teacher who showed that training emotional control is the only path to building sustainable inner peace. The goal of Stoicism is not to turn you into an emotionless machine, but to equip you with inner strength to accept what cannot be changed through acceptance and letting go, and to focus all your energy on what you can control, your own thoughts and actions. In this video, we will dive into 10 core principles, practical strategies to turn philosophy into everyday action. Together, we will learn how to cultivate self-discipline and self-control, how to overcome fear and shame, and understand the deeper meaning of living according to nature. Here is the promise. By the time this journey ends, you will hold in your hands not just knowledge, but a living practice of mindfulness and meditation, a toolkit to master your mind, so that no matter how chaotic the outside world becomes, it can no longer be the one deciding your inner peace. To truly absorb the power of Stoic philosophy, we need to place it back into the context in which it was born. This philosophy emerged in Athens around the 3rd century BC. But in today's journey, we'll focus on one of its most influential figures, The man who turned it into a practical art of living, Epictetus. The story of his life is the most vivid proof of the very philosophy he taught. Epictetus was born into slavery, a beginning that could not have been more disadvantageous in material terms. Even after he was freed, he went through some of the harshest trials a human being can face, things completely outside his control. And from within that limitation and oppression, his thought blossomed, centered on one unstealable truth: spiritual freedom. He was not an author in the usual sense. His wisdom was recorded by his student Arian in two main works, the most concise of which is the Enchiridion. This is not a purely theoretical philosophical text, but a practical handbook for life. It was designed to be a bedside manual, reminding readers daily of the principle of the dichotomy of control, helping them control your mind by clearly distinguishing between what belongs to us, opinions, choices, desires, and what does not belong to us, the body, possessions, other people's opinions. The historical backdrop of Epictetus's life was the Roman Empire, a period filled with injustice and political turmoil. In such an environment, seeking inner peace and maintaining inner strength was incredibly difficult. That's why Stoic philosophy was not a hobby for the leisurely, but a survival tool for building resilience when everything around you was falling apart. These teachings helped countless people face war, exile, and loss. When we understand that this philosophy was forged in the furnace of adversity, we begin to see how deeply relevant it is to the pressures of the modern world, where we, too, are searching for ways to cultivate self-discipline and self-control in the midst of chaos. After understanding the historical foundation of Stoicism and the life of Epictetus, we now dive into the first practical principle, the bedrock of every inner strength you long for: having a firm purpose. We are living in an age obsessed with distraction. Every day, we are swept away by thousands of demands, expectations from others, and unexpected events. Without a clear anchor point, without a lighthouse to guide us, our life becomes like a drifting boat with no direction. We are easily carried away by the winds and waves, our circumstances, social pressure, and other people's judgments, without any real control, your mind, or self-discipline and self-control over where we're heading. This absence of purpose is the core reason why we so often feel helpless when we have to deal with negative emotions triggered by the outside world. Epictetus once emphasized a harsh but deeply inspiring truth: the greater the difficulty, the greater the glory in surmounting it. But this only holds true when we have firm purpose. This purpose is not a to-do list. It is a deep commitment to the kind of person you want to become, the values you are willing to be living in according to nature for and dedicate your life to. It goes far beyond career or financial goals. It touches the core of your character, your wisdom, and your integrity. A firm purpose does not appear on its own. It requires deep reflection, an inner journey of mindfulness and meditation to answer difficult questions. What do I truly value? Which value is supreme, even if it brings discomfort or criticism? How do I want to be remembered when I'm no longer here? When you define your purpose as becoming a courageous person, a kind person, or someone who pursues truth regardless of the consequences, you've set a timeless compass. Once your firm purpose is clear, the impact of the outside world changes completely. Challenges, pressure, and unexpected events don't disappear, but they're no longer meaningless obstacles. Instead, they become stepping stones for you to climb, each difficulty a chance to reaffirm your commitment to that purpose. The effort of handling criticism or overcoming fear and shame stops being a burden and becomes a test that forges the very qualities you've chosen. Defining a firm purpose makes the outside world shrink. The mountains that once seemed impossible to climb turn into small steps on the path toward meaning. By focusing on this purpose, you begin to practice emotional control and acceptance and letting go of outcomes that don't truly matter, because the most important thing has been protected: your moral character. This is the first step to building true inner peace, a peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you're going, no matter how wildly life's currents may push and pull. How does the principle of having a firm purpose move from a philosophical idea into a living force in our real lives? Let's take a classic example in your career. Two people face the same bitter failure when a major project gets canceled. The first person, who has no clear, firm purpose, sees this failure as the end of their career and their self-worth. This person easily falls into a spiral of having to deal with negative emotions, feeling shame and fear about the future, and completely losing self-discipline and self-control. They are entirely controlled by external circumstances, the outcome of the project. In contrast, the second person has defined their life purpose not as the success of a single project, but as becoming a relentless learner and a resilient innovator. Their purpose is to build resilience through every setback. When the project fails, they may feel disappointed, but that disappointment doesn't turn into self-destruction. Instead, the failure becomes a golden opportunity to reaffirm their purpose. They ask themselves, what lesson can I take from this to serve my purpose of becoming a constant learner? In this way, the pain is transformed into motivation, and they immediately begin taking action to regain control of their mind. We can use an even deeper metaphor. Imagine that your life purpose is living according to nature, that is, living in harmony with core virtues. Suppose your purpose is integrity. When your boss asked you to lie or distort the truth, this behavior creates a storm of external pressure, and you may have to handle criticism or even lose your job if you refuse. Without a firm purpose, you will be ruled by fear and easily give in. But when your purpose is to become a person of integrity, that external pressure becomes an opportunity to shine. That refusal to lie, no matter how difficult or costly, becomes the moment when you feel your greatest inner peace and inner strength. The outside world may see you as a failure, but in your own mind, you are the victor, because you have been able to control your mind and protect your highest value. The acceptance and letting go here is the willingness to accept all negative material consequences in order to preserve spiritual integrity. Epictetus wants us to understand that when you attach yourself to a noble, unchanging purpose, you are practicing a form of continuous mindfulness and meditation, a state of self-discipline and self-control over the direction of your life. You are no longer being dragged by random currents. This firmness is the foundation that allows you to practice the remaining 9 principles of Stoicism effectively and sustainably. It turns pain into glory and ambiguity into meaning. If Principle 1 lays the foundation by defining a firm life purpose, then Principle 2 is the work of protecting your most precious treasure, your mind. This brings us to a core concept: guarding and mastering your mind. This is where the full power of Stoic philosophy is unleashed, and it is the first real step toward achieving true emotional control. Epictetus taught that the chaos outside harms us far less than the chaos we create within. Our nature is rational, yet we constantly allow ourselves to be carried away by automatic reactions. Emotions do not arise from events themselves, but from the way we think about those events. Objective events happen, but the interpretation, judgment, and labeling of those events as good or bad lies entirely within our control. It is precisely at this intersection, where you control your mind, that we discover freedom. Think about a situation where you were harshly insulted or criticized. The first impulsive reaction is anger, defensiveness, or the urge to strike back. Stoicism challenges us to pause. Instead of reacting instantly, we can treat that insult as a golden opportunity to practice patience, self-awareness, and self-discipline and self-control. This is not weakness. On the contrary, it is an act of absolute courage, a way to affirm your inner strength. Every time you resist an impulsive reaction, you are training what we might call your mental muscle. Just like lifting weights to strengthen the body, repeatedly choosing a mindful response reinforces your belief that you can control your mind. This belief is the foundation of resilience. To start building this sense of confidence and mastery, practice setting and completing small daily goals. Goals that require persistence, like waking up 15 minutes earlier or finishing a difficult task you usually procrastinate on. However, guarding your mind also includes an important defensive dimension: setting boundaries against mental trash. In this age of information overload, our minds are constantly poisoned by toxic people, noisy content, and negative media. Consuming these streams of information and energy forces you to deal with negative emotions over and over again. Epictetus encourages us to protect our inner space by replacing trash with what uplifts us. Good books, deep conversations, and supportive environments. This is also where practices like mindfulness and meditation show their full power. Their purpose is not to empty the mind, but to observe it. This observation creates a precious pause between stimulus and response. In that gap, we gain the power to choose a wise reaction instead of being controlled by instinct. When you master this pause, you'll realize that overcoming fear and shame or attaining inner peace is not something the outside world has to grant you. It is an ongoing inner choice that you make moment by moment. After defining what it means to guard and master your mind, the next question is, how do we actually practice this emotional control in the most stressful moments of our lives? Let's look at a situation almost all of us have faced. Being criticized by a coworker or a boss in front of everyone. A moment that triggers intense shame and anger. This is when controlling your mind becomes the hardest. The natural, impulsive reaction is to get defensive, argue back, or withdraw in shame. Stoicism offers a different choice. Epictetus teaches us that other people's actions cannot harm your soul unless you allow them to. When you are handling criticism, instead of accepting their judgment as absolute truth, you create a brief pause. This is where the practice of mindfulness and meditation can be applied instantly. In that short moment, you ask yourself, this is just someone else's opinion about my actions, not about my essence. Which response will affirm my inner strength and the life purpose I've chosen? In doing so, you transform the insult into a training opportunity, turning it into an exercise in resilience. You are no longer swept away by impulsive emotion. You reclaim self-discipline and self-control right there on the battlefield. Another illustration is setting mental boundaries against informational trash. Imagine your morning. The moment you wake up, you immediately check social media or the news. Instantly, your mind is flooded with negative headlines, social comparison, or hateful comments. You haven't done anything wrong, yet your mind is already forced to deal with negative emotions from the outside. Guarding your mind here means consciously practicing acceptance and letting go of those toxic sources of energy. Like a guard standing at the city gate, you choose what is allowed to enter your mental territory. You choose to read a good book, listen to an inspiring teaching from Stoic philosophy, or spend time on mindfulness and meditation instead of mindlessly scrolling through empty feeds. This is a radical act of self-discipline and self-control. By consistently practicing this selective intake, you create a quiet inner space where inner peace can truly take root. Finally, overcoming fear and shame also grows out of this very principle. Fear is often the result of us exaggerating the worst-case scenarios that might happen. When we practice guarding your mind, we learn to dissect our fears. What is the worst that could happen? Is it outside my control? If it is outside my control, I will accept it. Naming your fear and analyzing it with reason is the most direct way to strip it of its power. And each time you do, you reinforce your inner strength. After establishing a firm life purpose and training your ability to control your mind through guarding your mind, we move to a universal challenge in social life, facing and handling criticism. This is Principle 3, and it is the ultimate test of our emotional control. In the digital age, criticism, whether justified or baseless, can come at us with dizzying speed and with high emotional impact. It easily forces us to deal with negative emotions, creating feelings of shame and fear, directly threatening our inner peace. Stoic philosophy teaches that, just like every other external event, we can never control other people's opinions or actions. The only thing we can control is how we respond. This is the core of self-discipline and self-control when facing the social world. The weight of criticism decreases significantly when we clearly understand the motives, values, and deeper reasons behind our own actions. If you have done everything with integrity and in alignment with your firm life purpose, then external criticism is nothing more than noise. Your inner strength is built on inner clarity, not on the approval of the crowd. However, Stoicism does not encourage complacency. When being criticized, instead of instantly getting defensive or rejecting it, we are encouraged to practice a form of instant mindfulness and meditation. Pause and ask whether there is any grain of truth or lesson in that criticism that we need to receive. We open ourselves to feedback, but we do not allow it to become a death sentence on our self-worth. The goal is to filter out what is useful for our growth and courageously practice acceptance and letting go of the rest, malicious or irrelevant comments. Practicing patience and gentleness in our reactions is the key to preserving inner peace and even protecting our relationships. By not reacting with anger, you build a thick skin not through emotional numbness, but through rational understanding. Many criticisms, especially the harsh ones, often arise from the insecurity, frustration, or misunderstanding of the other person. When you view criticism through this lens, you control your mind and discover compassion instead of resentment. Epictetus wants us to turn criticism into a training exercise. Every time you handle criticism with calm and reason, you are strengthening your resilience. You are choosing to act according to the reason of a wise person rather than the instinct of a wounded creature. This is the most direct way to overcome the fear and shame caused by social judgment. How can we apply the Stoic technique of handling criticism when we're faced with the harshest attacks? Imagine you're an artist who has just released a deeply heartfelt work, only to have it torn apart by a highly influential critic in the press. Your first emotion is the urge to collapse, to deal with negative emotions by lashing out or retreating in shame. This is the moment when you must bring in the self-discipline and self-control you've been training. A Stoic does not deny the pain. Instead, they practice acceptance and letting go of the external outcome, that review, and refocus on their life purpose. Principle 1. They use mindfulness and meditation to create a pause and carry out an information analysis. Okay. It's separating facts from feelings. They ask themselves, did the critic point out any accurate technical flaws? If yes, that's a lesson to sharpen my craft. If not, if it's just a negative personal opinion, then I will control your mind and treat it as something outside my control. Reframing the critic's words. Just as Epictetus did, they understand that the critic is acting according to their own way of seeing the world. The criticism says more about the speaker, their standards, and their insecurities than it does about the listener's core worth. Patience and gentleness in response not only protect inner peace, but also affirm the artist's inner strength. Another example happens in personal relationships. When someone you love harshly criticizes your lifestyle or your choices. This kind of criticism can easily make you feel fear and pull you into defensive reactions. Without this principle, conflict escalates and both sides get hurt. Handling criticism. Here is an act of perceptual transformation. Instead of focusing only on the discomfort of the words, you look into the hidden pain or worry behind them. When you use emotional control to stay calm, you not only prevent the conflict from exploding, you also build resilience. You selectively ask, are they simply expressing concern for me in a clumsy way? You take the love or care as the useful core and practice acceptance and letting go toward the toxic form of the criticism. This practice helps you build thick skin, not by shutting down emotions, but by deeply understanding that resilience is not about never being criticized. It's about being able to learn from criticism without letting it destroy your self-worth. Overcoming fear and shame then becomes an active process. Facing criticism with reason and discernment and turning it into raw material for growth. After a deep journey through the first 3 principles of Stoic philosophy, defining a life purpose, guarding your mind, and handling criticism, we now arrive at the most important part: how to integrate all 10 principles into today's busy life, turning an ancient philosophy into a practical force that helps you achieve lasting inner peace. This is the take-home section, giving you concrete action strategies. 1. Strategy to control your mind. In moments of high stress in modern life, triggers and conflicts happen almost constantly. To maintain emotional control and inner strength, you need a quick response rule set. Epictetus's 5-second rule. When facing anger, frustration, or insult, ask yourself the famous Stoic question: is this within my control? If it's not, for example, other people's behavior, the outcome of a project, practice acceptance and letting go immediately. If it is, for example, your reaction, focus entirely on that. This distinction is the fastest way to take back control of your mind from the storm of emotions. The reversal practice. When you have to deal with negative emotions like anxiety or jubilation, try reversing the emotion. If you're anxious, turn it into preparation. For example, anxiety about a presentation becomes extra practice. If you're angry, convert it into gentleness and patience. Principle 3. 2. Building resilience through daily habits. Resilience is not an inborn trait. It is a mental muscle trained every day. Premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. Principle 6. Instead of avoiding thoughts about bad outcomes, spend 5 minutes each morning imagining the possible disruptions of the day: traffic jams, computer breakdowns, betrayal by a coworker. Then prepare in advance your stoic response. When those events actually happen, they won't catch you off guard, and you'll be able to respond with reason, not instinct. Delaying gratification, restraining actions. Principle 8. Train self-discipline and self-control by delaying small pleasures each day. For example, wait 10 minutes before checking your phone after waking up, or postpone eating dessert. This restraint strengthens your will and your ability to control your mind in the face of any impulse. Focused meditation and mindfulness. Principle 2. Spend 10 to 15 minutes each day observing the stream of your thoughts without judgment. This technique creates the crucial pause between stimulus and response, allowing you to choose a reaction that aligns with your life purpose, not with your raw instincts. 3. Overcoming fear and shame in relationships. Stoic principles offer powerful tools for facing fear and shame in social interactions. Overcoming fear of judgment. Principle 5. 2. The fear of public speaking or of being handling criticism often comes from giving too much power to other people's opinions. Remember, Principle 3. Their opinions are not within your control. Try a small shame exercise. Do something harmless that makes you feel slightly embarrassed. For example, wearing an unusually bright-colored shirt to reduce your sensitivity to external judgment. Understanding hatred. Principle 4. When you are insulted, instead of fixating on the hurt, reframe your perspective. The other person may be in pain, stressed, or ignorant. Practice empathy and forgiveness. Forgiveness is an act of inner strength. It is the act of putting down a burden in your own heart, not a declaration that the other person was right. 4. Applying living according to nature in modern life. Living according to nature. Principle 10. In today's world doesn't mean living in a cave. It means living in alignment with reason and virtue. Prioritizing virtue. In every decision, prioritize the Stoic virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. For example, when facing a difficult financial decision, ask which choice is just toward others, which choice is wise in the long term. Gratitude and acceptance of imperfection. Principle 9. Each evening, take time to write down one thing you're grateful for that day, even something very small. Acceptance and letting go of imperfection, your own and the world's, helps you funnel your energy into effort, what you control, instead of outcomes, what you don't control. DIT, the combined power of self-discipline and self-control. All 10 principles come together to form a complete system of self-discipline and self-control. Epictetus never promised an easy life. He promised a powerful response. By consistently practicing these concrete steps, from defining a firm purpose, Principle 1, to restraining impulses, Principle 8, and training inner strength, Principle 7, you are gradually shifting from a passive person into an active one. You are building an inner peace that doesn't depend on the absence of problems, but on inner steadiness in the midst of every problem. Remember, you don't have to change everything at once. Start with one small, sustainable step. Today, you will practice guarding your mind by delaying checking your phone for the first 10 minutes after you wake up. Of course, applying Stoic philosophy is not always easy or free of its own challenges. To have a complete and profound view, we need to acknowledge the common objections and the real difficulties that arise when trying to live a life of self-discipline and self-control, as Epictetus taught. One frequent criticism is this: does Stoicism lead to emotional numbness? When we try to control your mind and practice emotional control by acceptance and letting go of what is outside our control, are we turning ourselves into people who are disconnected from emotion and empathy? The real challenge here is a misunderstanding. The goal is not to deal with negative emotions by suppressing them, but to face them with reason, not letting them drive our actions. Tranquility, apatheia, is not indifference. It is inner peace achieved through managing our judgments. Another practical difficulty lies in Principle 10, living according to nature. For those who are facing financial hardship, serious illness, or devastating loss, is asking them to focus only on inner strength and resilience can sometimes be seen as excessively harsh. This criticism opens the door to perspectives from other schools of thought. For example, humanistic psychology, which emphasizes the importance of expressing and validating all emotions as part of the healing process. However, Stoicism maintains its position by offering a framework for overcoming fear and shame and pain. It does not claim that pain doesn't exist. It says that your response to pain is your final power. This is a balanced perspective. We acknowledge the pain, but then we choose to use reason to transform it into resilience and purpose, instead of allowing it to shape the entire course of our lives. Through our journey, exploring the principles of Stoic philosophy, from establishing a firm life purpose to practicing acceptance and letting go of what lies beyond our control, we have discovered a profound truth. Real power does not come from controlling circumstances, but from mastering our own mind and actions. We have learned that inner peace and inner strength are not gifts, but the result of continuous training. By applying practical strategies, from daily mindfulness and meditation to facing criticism with reason, handling criticism, we gradually shift from being passive to becoming active authors of our own lives. We have equipped ourselves with a toolkit of self-discipline and self-control, allowing us to overcome fear and shame and deal with negative emotions without being destroyed by them. Remember the teaching of Epictetus. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Seek instead for them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. This is an invitation for you to begin living according to nature, to live guided by your reason and your virtues. Now, the question is no longer what you know, but what you will do with this knowledge. Where will you start? Which principle will you choose to practice first, today? Remember, self-mastery is not a destination, but a continuous journey. By choosing conscious responses, maintaining control your mind, and persistently walking this path of mental growth, you will discover true freedom and meaning.